Are you ready for the quantum age?
Humanity's next step in evolution?
Dream Vision 7 Radio Network invites you to the extraordinary platform of Evolutionary Voices for the Quantum Age.
Let's explore. Learn more about this upcoming age where we bridge science with spirituality.
Where potentiality meets reality.
Where we take compassion into action.
Our trailblazers and visionaries will ask the whys, the what-ifs, while igniting continuous possibility.
Come along with us into an age beyond what we know today, where we can grow together in unity consciousness.
Experience Evolutionary Voices for the Quantum Age, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Eastern on DreamVision7Radio.com.
Welcome to Awakening to True Happiness with modern-day mystic David Hoffmeister, offering you the how-to to spiritual awakening by addressing on a practical level answers to your deepest questions. David Hoffmeister is a world-renowned teacher of A Course in Miracles and has been traveling the world for the past quarter of a century, offering his wisdom to audiences wherever invited. On this show, you'll hear recordings of David's best live talks, inviting you into an experience of deep wisdom and true clarity. To learn more about David, visit his website at davidhoffmeister.com. Awakening to True Happiness with David Hoffmeister is part of Evolutionary Voices for the Quantum Age, heard Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Eastern on the Dream Vision 7 Radio Network.
Oh, I just love coming out to the Bay Area. I love it out here. I love the vibe and the depth and the presence, and it's one of those kind of meccas of those who have such a sincere desire to awaken and to come to a true connection with Source and to live it, to actually live it. So for me, this experience of what people have called the spiritual journey has gone on for decades, and with a lot of devotion and trust, then I think the fruits of the Spirit really start shining through, and that's just basically your peace of mind and happiness, joy, really consistently. So I say I haven't really had a bad day for 30 years. I think it's been maybe 20, 30 years since I lost track, but it's been a long time since I had a bad day, and it's because it's from the dedication and the devotion and living really an inspired life. And I think all of us know that that's like the key to spiritual awakening, is inspiration. We have this inspiration, this light in us, and sometimes it seems like it's quite covered over in awareness, but when it starts to burst forth, then we really feel like we're in our true calling. And once we've gotten into our calling, we're really into the tractor beam, you might say, of awakening. And it gets very involuntary. Come on in, we're just starting. We've got seats here. Yeah. So I thought I'd talk a bit about non-duality, and hopefully for some of you bring in some new aspects, because I think the teachings that take us into this non-dual experience, there are traditional means that have served well for many, many generations, and those are often known as meditation and inquiry. There are different breathing techniques, different movement techniques. There's contemplation. There's a pathway of prayer, of centering prayer. There's just so many aspects, and hopefully tonight myself and others that will join me on the panel up here will be able to introduce some new ones to go along with the traditional ones, because I think everybody is aware that we would hope to have that experience consistently, and in the time sense, we would like to save time. If there's something that could help seem to accelerate us into the experience of a consistent peace of mind and a consistent joy, then that would be of interest to us in spiritual awakening. And also, I will talk about some terms that are tossed around in many non-dualistic traditions. I'm familiar with quite a few traditions, and I know that the terminology can be different, and for those who are on a non-dual path, sometimes when you're going through it and you're listening to one teacher and he's using a certain word, maybe like consciousness or awareness or forgiveness or whatever the words are, that with different traditions and different teachers there are different meanings. Some teachers would say something like thought is a problem. Or other traditions might say, you need to learn to get out of your mind. And then some traditions are teaching you that you are mind, holy mind, purely mind, and nothing but mind, and that you need to purify that mind, because if it's a split mind and it serves two masters, as Jesus talked about, then there's a difficulty with trying to ride two horses like love and fear. They don't really go together very well. It's like trying to mix oil and water. So, even in terms of those kind of teachings, I can tell you a bit, having worked with A Course in Miracles for 33 years, and the Course is from Jesus, and so it's got in some cases, he's loose with the words a little bit, but in many cases he will take terminology that we're familiar with from the non-dual traditions, and he will give us a pretty precise definition, and then when you watch the whole symphony together, you go, oh my gosh, this is absolutely amazing, this is extraordinary. And I can give you an example. A term that's often spoken about in a lot of non-dualistic traditions is consciousness. And the first time I came to the Course, I studied a lot of traditions, but I had to really look where Jesus was defining consciousness. He says, consciousness is the domain of the ego. Whew, that's interesting. I've heard a lot of different traditions, but I've never heard that definition. And so when it's Jesus Christ telling me consciousness is the domain of the ego, that it's variable, it receives messages, it's kind of a receptive mechanism, consciousness is, and it receives messages from above, the higher self, or the intuition, and below, the subconscious or the ego. And so it's like, fascinating. So consciousness is not like it's sometimes described as, in quantum physics, they'll say consciousness is the ground of all being. Jesus wouldn't say that. He says, no, it's the domain of the ego. The good news about consciousness is that it can be trained. And anybody who's into any spiritual discipline, doesn't matter which one, knows that it involves a lot of discipline and mind training. Whether you're watching a movie like The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, with Dan and Socrates, and there's a lot of mind training that goes on there. It's pretty sharp and pretty steep. In some traditions, the teacher-student relationship is quite intense, like in that movie. And there's a training that's going on, and I would say it's actually a purification, so that what you're doing is you're training your consciousness to receive from what is, we'll say, above, or just a metaphor, but from Spirit, to receive your guidance and your messages from Spirit, more and more consistently from the Spirit than from the ego. So that training is absolutely essential. There's a very much of a discipline. And it's important to realize that can't be skipped over. And of course, whether we talk about self-inquiry or meditation or contemplation or whatever, it's just good to know that consciousness is something that you're going to have to focus your mind training on, your effort towards that. Beingness, spirit, doesn't need to be trained. I amness, pure beingness. There is no mind training involved in that. That's just a state of being perfectly awake. But even that is defined by Jesus as light. It's abstract. It doesn't have any thought forms. Beingness does not have any thought forms. So when we're dealing with consciousness, we're dealing with thought forms all the time. One of the workbook lessons is my thoughts are images I have made. So thought forms are these very specific thoughts that involve linear time and that block the awareness of spirit or pure being. And that's like the crucible. Consciousness is our crucible for awakening. Whichever pathway you take, whichever way you train your mind, you're working in the realm of consciousness. Consciousness also, since it's thought forms, it involves symbols, and with meditation you want to sink deep within your mind and sink deeper and deeper, and it seems like an emptying of consciousness. And I would say that's pretty accurate as well, that as you tune in more and more to the spirit and less to the ego, it's like your mind seems to empty. Emptying the contents of consciousness is what it's been called in many traditions. And that's a beautiful pathway as well. I think with A Course in Miracles, what it does is it's a mind training program that's designed to be used almost anywhere, in any time or place, and so it's not very specific in terms of the behaviors or in terms of the environments. Like many pathways to God, they would say remove yourself from distractions, try to sometimes step away from the world and the busyness of the world and try to do that. And that can be a helpful symbol and stepping stone, although I think all of us know that, we can say your mind goes with you wherever you go. So if you've got the monkey mind going, whether you're sitting in a cave with Ramana's cave over Arunachala, or whether you're back on Market Street in San Francisco, you still have your consciousness to deal with. You still have those thoughts to deal with. And it's still a call for training, for stilling the mind. Some of the things that I've found from using the Course is that basically much of the workbook lessons of A Course in Miracles are like doing a Zen, open-eyed meditation along with instruction as you move through the day. So you have one central thought. It could be, there is nothing to fear, which is workbook lesson 48, where you take one lesson and you carry it like a torch through the day, and you go through your activities of the day with your eyes open. Occasionally you may be instructed to take time out, to close your eyes, and at times to sink inward. There's very, very specific instructions that come along with the workbook of A Course in Miracles, but overall the context is quite fun because you don't have to have a lot of special circumstances or special situations, so you're not trying to orchestrate situations. You could pretty much go with it and transfer that training with whatever you are perceiving. So in that sense, it's very open and very flexible. I think it's very useful in terms of a practical application for training your mind. They're very powerful lessons of undoing your self-concept, of dropping the mask, of undoing your entire distorted perception of the world, to clear the consciousness out in the most rapid way possible. Along the way, of course, there's aspects of self-inquiry in there because you are really watching and observing, and you're aware that this whole mind training experience that may go on for weeks or months or years or decades always revolves around identity. That the core of spiritual awakening is, like the Greeks said, know thyself, know who you are. And all of the great traditions have said you need to realize the self, you need to actualize the self, realize the self, And this pathway